father of Ida Carroll, who became the principal, he was an early supporter of the Royal Northern School. And I don't know if there's any music teachers here, but what do you think of this? So this is his notes that he gave for a speech to the Northern School of Music's holiday course in 1935. And apparently the values that you should instill in music students are mental, social, and spiritual, music as a language, grammar and literature, technique and expression, body and soul, and the only universal language is sound, and the only universal script is music. I think that's really pretty. Also, his handwriting's gorgeous. What have we got in the chat? Archivists are really important. Thank you, Barbara. So there's a really interesting connection with Walter Carroll. And as a teacher, your speech must be quiet and simple. I'd be rubbish at that. Your aspect must be cheerful. Your lesson must be prepared. Your firmness must command, and the questions must be collective and individual. So the questions that you ask your students must be collective questions and individual questions, or to the collective and to the individuals. So Walter Carroll was actually pretty interesting. He was, oh God, he did so many things. He was a successful child composer. He was on the Manchester Education Board or the National Education Board for Music? I can't remember. Was it the National? And so he was really well respected, and he gave talks at the school, and some of his stuff's really interesting. So we're going some of the courses on music. Okay, here we go. So this is from 1948. It is a concert program for the school. So in 1943, the school incorporated to a public organisation, as I said, and they renamed themselves the Northern School of Music. So it's the same school, just a different name. And this is a Christmas concert. And something that I thought was really quite interesting in the concert is they have this fantastic collection of what's the word I want to use? Kind of like established composers. They've got Beethoven, blah blah blah. They've got, you know, there's the traditional stuff, and then later down the line, you get in the same concert, you've got Benjamin Britten and Peter Warlock and Arnold Cook. So there's this really interesting kind of trend in the Northern School that, from what we've gathered with the records that we have that exist, that we know of, yes, they program Beethoven, yes, they program their Bach, yes, they program their Mozart, you know, they program these crowd pleasers, but they weren't afraid to kind of like put in stuff that you wouldn't expect, or that was relatively new, or that wasn't performed much. There wasn't an idea that they have to. Oh, cool. Well done, Harvey. Harvey, if anyone's got any questions about Arnold Cook, Harvey's your guy. He's been researching a lot. So there's this really, really cool section in the kind of history of the Northern School, and all the way back to the Mathé, that says, yes, you know, we're gonna explore the traditional composers, we're gonna explore the ones with a really established repertoire, but while we're here, let's have a go at some really interesting, more contemporary or lesser known composers, particularly local ones. So there's a lot of John Ireland, there's a lot of Alan Rawsthorne, there's a lot of Arnold Cook compositions in there that are really, really cool. I need to keep this chat box open, don't I? Because it's all that kind of stuff. That is 1948. So pretty recent with his material. Is that the clarinet solo, was that recently published, you know, by that point, Harvey? Yeah. Oh, that's cool. So yeah, they just thought, that's pretty good, we'll have that. Which, from what I understand, from what I've seen, there wasn't that much of similar kind of approach or ethos in programming compared to the Royal Manchester and the Halle. There was a lot more, we know what pleases crowds, we know what we want our students to be able to perform, whereas this is much more, let's give this a go, and we'll see if we can work in some other people. Similarly, in 1936, there's Armstrong Gibbs, pretty recent, and that kind of stuff. So there's lots of different kind of material that comes through the programs that tells us a lot about the school. So it's not just the fact that it's not just this is the music you need to learn. there's a lot more risk taking, it seems, in the Northern School. And we don't know if that's just because they didn't have anything to lose, or if it's just they thought, you know, this is really important to be able to do this. Oh, cool. So, whoops. Yeah, similar here. This is something that became that I got really interested in once I started noticing it in the college, in the school's programs. The amount of women composers that they program is a lot more than I would have expected. It's almost like they've really tried to go and find some, like Margaret Hubicki, that I think she was the one that designed music for dyslexic people. I think she did some sort of work around that. And she's, you know, this is a Christmas concert, so you could have all kinds of stuff in there that, you know, big crowd pleasers, big carols, but they find some really interesting stuff that you find that, yeah, you've got Tchaikovsky, you've got Mendelssohn, but there's also Margaret Hubicki that is a contemporary female composer, and they program her stuff more than once. So it's really interesting to find a school that will kind of take that risk almost to program something that people might not be interested in, or might not have heard, or might not have that pull to get people, you know, bums on seats and sell these tickets. They didn't care, they just did it. Don't know, never mind. Oh, that's why. Same again, 1954, Frida Swain, female composer. In the junior school concerts, there's a lot of Dorothy Pilling in there. Again, she was a student and then a teacher. She was also a composer. So they have her material in there as well. So they really do pull on a wide range of composers to tell their story, which is really, really interesting. And again, I haven't seen it much elsewhere. So it's all really interesting to see and to do, to explore in that way. So one of the other things that they did that was a little bit later on was operas. They started their operas in 1952. So they've been going a good while before they branch into opera. They started their speech and drama course, which is also pretty interesting. The speech and drama course was run by a lady called Adelaide Traynor, and it wasn't just Shakespeare and that kind of stuff. For some reason, they did a lot of performances of playwrights around the Spanish Civil War. I don't know why, but there's a lot of playwrights that either kind of shed a light on it, or worked through it, or were killed from it. And then you've also got your Shakespeare, and then rather embarrassingly, quite a lot of George Bernard Shaw, who, while wrote some really incredible plays, was also super kind of enthusiastic about anti-vaccination and eugenics. So that's an interesting combination. Spanish Civil War, eugenics. There's, you know, I'm sure there was a reason for it. So there's a lot you can sort of like explore in that, and we'll come back to the speech and drama school in a little bit, because there's an interesting point that Ida Carroll makes when the Royal Northern College of Music comes up, in that, well, what are you going to do with my drama students? So the operas. The first one was 1952, and it was The Bartered Bride by Smetana. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, so I apologize if I'm not. And I'll see if I can show you the stage that they were working on. They had a small stage. Let's have a look if I can find it. And so they didn't have their own stage. So the Royal Manchester had its own stage, or they used the Free Trade Hall or something similar. The school itself, in the Northern School of Music, the top room was a here we go. This is the top room of the Northern School of Music. You've put an orchestra in there, but not much else. So this is, I think that's Maurice Handfuss, who, if I'm remembering correctly from the oral histories we did, made a lot of people cry. He wasn't a pleasant man to be to kind of work with, but apparently did some amazing work with the students. Yes. So it could be Adrian Bolt, actually. It could be. The Northern School of Music practiced in this space, and then they performed their recitals and oratorios. They were huge in the oratorios in the Holdsworth Hall. And then this is the stage that they used to do their operas, their full-scale operas, was the Lesser Free Trade Hall, which is kind of like a back room in the Free Trade Hall. And so your stage is there, your orchestra's there, and your audience is there. You are right on top of everybody. And a lot of the reviews of the sessions and the performances through that time about that, they always mention how well they did on such a small stage, which I think is a very kind of quite a sweet compliment to have. You did very well for the resources you were given, that kind of thing. So you can see how absolutely slammed this stage is. Full opera, tiny stage. So there's a few oral histories we have that have referenced the performances, and someone remembers basically sitting in the double bassist's lap almost to try and get this material, to try and be able to play in such a small space. If anyone's interested in the oral histories, we are having them all transcribed, and we're putting clips on the Manchester Digital Music Archive. So always keep checking in that, and I'll show you how to get access to that in a bit. So the next thing we've done operas. There's speech and drama. There's contemporary composers where you wouldn't expect them to be from such a small school. There's lots of really interesting things the school is doing, and it became quite big. There was hundreds and hundreds of students at the end in just the junior school. So one of the things that did come through, that any organisation in Manchester that started in the 20s and went through for a few years, was basically the war, the Second World War. And the school had this incredible experience. One of the things that happened was for one Ida Carroll, who's here, was the secretary, and she was the ARP warden, the air raid precaution warden for Didsbury. Her dad's here, her mother's Gertrude here, and that's Elsa, her sister. So she had a really interesting experience, and we'll get onto that in a second, because some of there's a really incredible story I have to tell you guys. But the newspaper announcement in 1939 basically said, okay, yeah, so the war started. By the way, the school's still running, it's still all fine, but anyone coming to a concert has to wear a gas mask, which is kind of reminiscent of what we're going through now. And when you look through some of the reviews and some of the papers, particularly the letters from Geoffrey Griffiths, who I'll explore that in a bit, a lot of it is like, oh yeah, that's happening now. So there's some really interesting parallels to draw, and all because someone, the Ida Carroll Trust, kept this material for us when the Carroll family basically ran out when Ida died in 1995. They went into the house and they preserved a lot of this material, and all of this, there's the letters, her incredible letters that were sent to her, have this amazing information that we're now able to explore. And I'm able to go, that sounds like lockdown. That sounds like lockdown. Oh, look, it's lockdown. So you can always connect with someone in an archive. And the good thing is that if they're dead, they can't talk back. So I do thoroughly encourage reading these letters when you get a chance. So Ida Carroll, just to put her in context, daughter of Walter Carroll, as we said. This is a little book. I've only given you one page here, but there's quite a few, that Walter Carroll wrote about Ida's musical education since she was a child. We've got here, at the age of 1.5, Ida made up a little tune which she often sang, especially in bed. And there's a lot of information we have about Ida's childhood, because Walter Carroll diligently recorded it. It's almost like he's exploring his kind of prowess almost as a music teacher and as a children's composer on his own children. He's like training them in different ways and recording how it works and kind of experimenting in that way. So we're really lucky to have this recording, the collection of that recording of his work. Ida went on to be this incredible woman who steered the college through 20 years of negotiations to become to end up with the Royal Northern College of Music. But here we see her as 1.5 years old, already composing and teaching music. Whether she actually, it is pretty cool, yeah. Whether she actually thought, I'll write some music, or if she's just going around the house going da 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 da, we don't know. And he's gone, oh, that's very interesting. Yes, she's done that. We'll record that. We'll write that down. But there's a lot of information here about her musical development as a child, who then becomes a really important music educator herself. So to put her in context, she is raised as a musician. Her training is devoted to music, and she is herself devoted to the Northern School of Music itself. This is her, young Ida, with lovely hair. Through the Second World War, unfortunately, very early on, Hilda Collins, who was the founder, becomes ill, and she's pretty much as soon as the Second World War breaks out, she becomes ill, and Ida has to step up from being secretary to being secretary and principal to steer it through for a good few months while the war is going on, while the war's just started. And in the Blitz, is it 1940? Manchester Blitz, I want to say. I can't remember. In 1940, I think it is, just a few days before Christmas, Manchester gets basically carpet bombed, and the Northern School of Music, all its windows get shattered overnight. Now, to give you an idea of the kind of woman Ida Carroll was, she turns up the next day after everything's died off. She turns up the next day, and she goes to the shop underneath the Northern School of Music, which was, I think, a music shop. I think it was a Museum Hawks, but I can't remember exactly. And she points at the handyman and goes, "You come here." And they go down the road, pick up some brown linoleum, and start to paper up the walls, the windows that are shattered, so they can keep students coming in the day after. And then she gets another guy, and they go down and they put the windows, they put linoleum in the windows. The manager of the music shop comes and says, "I believe you've got one of my men working for you." And she goes, "I've got two. On you come." And he also gets involved and starts putting up the music, and starts putting up the windows. So we get this idea of this woman that just doesn't take no for an answer, basically. "Oh, your building got bombed. Don't matter. I'm still going to have students. I'm still going to get this done. We've still got things to do." It's very much a make do and mend, keep calm and carry on, Ida Carroll. But so that's the kind of the official record of the Northern School of Music. That's the story that we're told through reports and the magazines and all kinds of stuff. What we also have is this gorgeous narrative of letters. In the mid-30s, Ida Carroll, when she's late 20s-ish, she meets a chap called Geoffrey Griffiths, and he is he's like a travel agent who works at Stanton's, who has premises in like Piccadilly and Oldham and Ashton and stuff like that. So a local travel agent. And the reason that we think they get together, or they get to know each other, is because Walter Carroll, her father, would buy his train tickets to London from Stanton's and would chat with Griff. So they got to know each other. Turns out Griff is interested in music. He's got a pretty good voice. Walter Carroll recruits him to work as to be one of the choir members from in his church, Birch Church, where he's the choir master. Griff gets music lessons from Ida Carroll, and they get together. And what we find is Griff is this prolific letter writer. We have about 1,500 letters that Griff sends to Ida, and most of them so far cover the Second World War. So interesting. A lot of them are on the Manchester Digital Music Archive, and they are we're putting more up. And again, we're trying to get them transcribed because they're so rich in information. He ends up working for the Northern School of Music in 1945 when Ida says, "Actually, we need someone to manage the finances. Do you want to come and have a job with me?" And he goes, "Yeah." And then he works at the Northern School of Music. So this is Ida when she's a young lady. And then we have, this is on holiday. That's Griff, and that's Ida later on. And then this is them when they're kind of in their dotage, as it were, still obsessed with each other, besotted. And it's really sweet story. So what we have are these letters, right? And as an archivist, you open this box and there's loads of letters from the Second World War. You go, "Oh my God, this is amazing." You go to the next box, it's also full of letters from the Second World War. You go, "This is incredible." You go to the next box, it's also full of letters from the Second World War. So I spent lockdown basically reading this love story. I'm hoping to share some of the highlights with you here. Yeah, little old man, he's such a sweetheart. So what we have is this story. And Griff has this incredible way with words that I can't believe couldn't have won anybody over. For example, one of the ways that he tells Ida that he loves her is that he insists that anyone under 70 should have a reason to miss their bus home because she's his reason. He doesn't just go, oh, I love you. He extrapolates these wonderful phrases and these wonderful terms of endearment. You're the reason I miss my bus. It's very, very sweet. So we have, for example, 1941. See if I can highlight that. There we go. So they've been together for a few years. They've decided that they're going to get married. Ida Carroll writes to her parents. I don't know why she does it from so far away. One of the rumors is that Walter Carroll didn't approve, but she says, don't be alarmed. I'm not eloping, but me and Griff are going to get married in a month. And they have these incredible plans to get an apartment together, to kind of move in together, to work together, to live together in the Second World War. At this time, Ida is an air raid precaution warden for Didsbury, and Griff is part of the auxiliary fire service for Ashton. So he spends a few nights a week sat in a pub in Ashton looking for fires after bombings. That's how he delivers his war service, as a volunteer. So she says, don't worry, when I tell you that Griff and I have decided we want to get married on November the 1st. So she's away from her parents, she writes to them and says, we're going to get married. All the way through the Second World War, there's all these kind of different things going on. And then later, he said, Griff writes to her and says, as much as I should like to be married tomorrow, possibly the choice of November the 1st is too soon for you to collect yourself. And now Papa Stanton, who is the owner of the travel agents, is frightened by the early summons of Vernon, who was one of the workers, so he gets enlisted, and has sent in the papers for temporary deferment. And I haven't been called for the medical yet. So he's worried that Griff is worried that that he's going to get called up, but that it's also too soon to get married to sort it out properly. There's a lot of stalling going on both sides at the moment. And later we learn that Griff's mum dies just a few weeks before they plan to get married, and the wedding is called off. There's this tragic letter where he goes, thank you for understanding so much. I know you understand, but I can't do this right now. And they never get married. That never happens again. They live together, they love each other, they work together, but they never actually get married. And I'm not quite sure why. We haven't got to those letters yet. Hopefully there are letters. But these letters are so rich in information, not just about Ida Carroll and Geoffrey Griffiths, but about the Second World War in Manchester. They describe how people experience it. They describe how it's interrupting. They describe how fantastic the idea of this war is. One of the best euphemisms we've had so far from Griff about the Second World War is the present spot of trouble. It's a very English way of approaching an international crisis. And again, you can see how many people have euphemisms for what's going on now. I think Griff would have quite something to say about it in his letters if he was around. But there's this fantastic narrative about concert life and about how things like marriage get interrupted, about how people's experience in Manchester and how it interrupts their work, what the blackout does to people's work, how travel changes. He's a travel agent, and we learn a lot about how people travel differently and where they go. Obviously, suddenly all the travel brochures for Germany get taken down, and then Poland and Austria, everything just gets scrabbled back. There's a really, really interesting collection there. If anyone is interested in learning more about the letters, like I said, a lot of them on the Manchester Digital Music Archive, and I'm hoping to put them all up that we've digitized so far. So keep an eye out for that. This I love. So Griff has this wonderful connection with some very interesting people, and again, it shows this fantastic way that the war, the Second World War, affects so many different people. So here he's describing his time spent in the bar parlour of the George and Dragon in Ashton in his auxiliary fire service volunteering. So it's him, he's a travel agent. We also have a sports outfitter and a fruitier, and a jeweler as well. And they're all signed up, they've all volunteered to work together to be in this bar parlour, to spot fires when the bombs fall. And that's their job. And it just seems like the perfect opportunity for a kind of like sitcom play: a fruitier, a travel agent, a jeweler, and an outfitter. And they spend all night basically sat in the bar, looking out for fires, checking that everything's all right, being on hand. And apparently the sports outfitter reduced me to silent admonition or admiration by doing my Sunday Times crossword in less than 2 hours. They're trying to spend time as neatly as they could. And the jeweler made the night hideous and slumber difficult. We're assuming they're a snorer, but we don't really know. The fruitier stayed at home with a sick wife. So there's lots and lots of different information we can get from these records. And this is one of the most interesting things I found about the Northern School of Music archive and about its people. It's not just about music. This is about people's life and their lived existence through this incredible time. The war interrupts all kinds of stuff. One of my favorites is how indignant Griff gets when the Second World War interrupts his life. For example, I suppose that ignorant cad Hitler doesn't realise just what a fantastic nuisance he is, visiting now at this time, now at that, sometimes not coming until very late and depriving us all of hours and hours together, and again coming at entirely the wrong moment. Or probably he realises only too well and does it on purpose. So not only does the Second World War mean, obviously it's a Second World War, but Ida being an air raid precaution warden, Griff being in the fire auxiliary service, or auxiliary fire service, and of course blackouts and bombs being dropped, means it interrupts his day, and that's really annoying for him. So these letters are one of the best things that have come out of this collection. For example, this is one that he's writing while we assume sitting under the stairs, because that was his bomb shelter before they had the public one. And it goes, the second warning, just as I was settling down to write to you, and now the house is alive with people. People would come in and go into the bigger houses and things like that. The ink is lost, can't find his pen, and everything is foul. The exact opposite of life between 2:30 and 8 a.m. today, which was when he would be working. And Tuesday seems a long way off, and Saturday further still. Even Paul is gurgling. Paul is his pipe. He personified everything to show his displeasure. However, there are no guns, so I will continue to write for a few moments before playing cards. So there's this fantastic interval in his life that he relays to Ida. And one of the most incredible things about this archive and about this project is, again, you don't just learn about music. You learn about Manchester as a whole and what it went through and what its people went through the Second World War, just through these records. It's fantastic. It's an incredible collection. And again, if people are interested in these letters, there are hundreds of them. So please do get in touch and I can point you in the right direction. So they lived together in their later years, Griff and Ida. Griff ended up getting quite ill and was in a care home for the last few weeks or months, I think. And Ida Carroll, with the perfect pitch that she had, could hear on the door, the electronic lock on the door, and when to his rooms, and when students would come and visit, they'd go, oh, like it's really annoying, I have to like get permission, I have to go through and people won't let me in. And she calls out the lock, the combination lock on the electronic door in solfa. So she will tell them exactly what note to play in which order, and that will be the lock on the door. So there's lots of musical students then coming in, cheating and going through the door lock, and she stays by him all that time. It's a really sweet story that we have, and it really puts into perspective her. That's how you remember your credit card pin. So it puts into really interesting perspective what we've learned about Ida and the school in her, like, the official record. And there's this real dichotomy between, again, you were either she was either the most wonderful person in the world or you were terrified of her. And then we have all of these lovely love letters that explore her relationships and explore her personality and explore her experiences. It's a real privilege to be able to work with that and to share that with you. So if anyone's interested, please do let me know, because I am, as you can see, obsessed with this story now. So what I wanted to talk about now is it kind of feeds into the Royal Northern College of Music, as it were. In 1955, the local authorities that funded the Northern School and the Royal Manchester kind of took account post-war of their finances and said, hang about, we're funding 2 music schools and they're down the road from each other. Let's have a meeting. So they have a meeting and they get together and they say to the music to the music schools, so we're not going to continue to fund both of you. We do realize you're super important, but what if you just like merged, became one school, and then we'd only fund one of you. We'd only fund that one thing. And they both went, no. A very, very strong no. And there's lots of reasons for it. One of the main ones is, again, they're very different organizations. Now, on paper, to a funder as big as a local authority, all they're seeing is 2 music schools. But what the schools themselves are saying is, well, the Royal Manchester says we fund music professionals in terms of performers. We have this legacy to maintain. We have these incredible, at the time in the 50s, there was this amazing draft of composers that came through the school, like John Ogden, Harrison Birtwistle, like really, really incredible people. And they're going, well, we're doing this. And the Northern School of Music goes, yeah, and we're training music teachers. We're training drama students, we're training junior school, we are training part-time and evening classes. Like, we're very different organizations. And the local councils both go, okay, think about that for a minute. And these meetings and these conversations happen continuously. There's all of this kind of like, there's this really strong narrative that comes through, and they're going, you're not getting it, we're different, but we do understand that we do need to change, and we will do that under very strict conditions. And what happens, what you get from 1955 to 1972 is nearly 20 years of these conversations to form what is now the Royal Northern College of Music. So what I want to do is just show you some of the records that the school created, because they are fantastic. They're so Ida Carroll. I'll show you these. Let's see if I can get them up. Oh, there, right. Sorry, she's a bit twisted there. I forgot to flip that. So what you get from these organizations is this lady who's in love, who's having a fabulous time, to that Ida Carroll. You're suddenly dealing with Ida Carroll, the principal of the Northern School of Music. There she is. Lovely lady. What we have is lots and lots and lots of these records. So these are records that Ida has annotated, and some of them she has destroyed verbally from these negotiations. So the new College of Music, a draft schedule of accommodations, but only 500 full-time students. And what you get is the most amazing record of this development, because the 2 schools are so attached to their own identity that refuse to budge an inch. So from the Northern School of Music, there's a lot on this that basically said not good enough, not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. For example, the refectory to seat 150, she says that's too small. For 8 lecture rooms, she says, what about big classes such as oral training or orchestra or movements? Like, where are we going to put these people? There's not enough teaching room, she says. I'm sure we can all relate to that. And the bottom line, the whole thing is too small. This is from 1960, so she's got a way to go yet. But this is a really interesting record, and there's loads of different kinds. There's loads of these records that come up through the collection that just chipping away at the minute detail, to the point where once the school starts to get approved, and once people start to report on it, she is she is down your throat if you say that it will be a merger between the Northern School of Music and the Royal Manchester College of Music, because what actually happens is both institutions fold to make room for the new Northern College of Music and then the Royal Northern College of Music. They are not the same institution, and they do not merge into one another. They both disappear, and then they both feed up their resources to this brand new school. To the part where the whole reason why John Mandwell was founding principal of the Royal Northern College of Music was because both schools agreed that you can't have a principal inherited from one of the original colleges. It's totally different. We need a totally neutral person. So they got John Mandwell. They would kind of recruit him to do it. That's why the Northern School of Music exists, is because they both put their foot down and said, no, this isn't happening. Even to the point where the finances were negotiated. So, for example, the Royal Manchester College of Music was relatively cash rich compared to the Northern School, and it had a lot of really incredible assets. It had this amazing building on Deaver Street, which isn't there anymore. I think it used to be behind Contact Theatre, where that area is. It's not there anymore. But the councils didn't really understand why they would look at Royal Manchester College of Music wouldn't sell their building to then just put the cash straight into the new school. They said, well, this is our asset. These are our things. So if we're going to sell our property, what we're going to do with that money is we're going to funnel it into scholarships for the new college. The councils didn't understand that, and they were like, but you need money to build a college. And the Royal Manchester said, yeah, you told us to, so you give us the money. We're going to do what we need to do with our money to make sure that we are providing a proper education for students. And one of the ways to do that is through scholarships. So we have here, let me find it. Here we go. Another example of Ida Carroll protesting in the idea of a speech and drama course. The new College of Music wasn't going to be accommodating to speech and drama students. So they go, well, where are we going to put all these students? Turns out, in the end, that part of the school, of the Northern School, got amalgamated into Manchester Metropolitan University's School of Theatre. I think it's called now. I could be wrong there. But they were going to be on Piccadilly, then they were going to be in Liverpool, they were going to be, I think they were going to be in Gateshead at some point for some reason, and then MMU, or it would have been UMIST at the time, I think, said, oh, we'll take them. So there's this really interesting kind of connection between that's interesting. Sorry, I will read all these chats in a minute. There's a really interesting connection between the Northern School of Music, and not just the Royal Manchester College of Music and not just the Royal Northern College of Music, but the wider Manchester's cultural offer as a whole. Quite a bit of it will stem from the Northern School of Music and the whole idea and ethos of Hilda Collins of having a holistic experience and a holistic offer. Not much of that came into the Royal Northern College of Music. We do have the alumni and the friends, as it were, and the junior school. That is all from the Northern School of Music, not the Royal Manchester. So it's a really interesting legacy. And then the parts of it that didn't get kept were sent elsewhere. They were preserved elsewhere, spread through Manchester. The legacy is a Mancunian legacy. It's not just ours. So it's a real interesting kind of these tendrils and these kind of feelers that get sent out all through Manchester in the 70s that were from the Northern School. This is one of my favorite documents. This is the cattiest document I have yet to read. And it's all about the Northern School of Music. This is a confidential kind of private memo from Ida about the council meeting of the new school, of the new college. And it's just fantastic. So one of the things she says is, the danger of the situation, so the reducing of schools to one school, is intensified by the somewhat nebulous suggestion of the appointment of a principal. This has been avoided in discussion until the last meeting of the staffing subcommittee, when it was thought that the time had come to ask the Department of Education and Science what they are prepared to pay. The remark made, it seemed to be taken as a matter of urgency that the principal should be appointed immediately. And from Mr. Michael Kennedy's remarks, who was a critic at the time and heavily involved in the school, both schools, it is time that decision on the future should be made of one man, who seemingly should have been consulted on drawing up of plans, and in any case should have some say in the new syllabus. So they decided to get this school, and she's just going, they haven't even got a principal yet. Like, what are they doing? We haven't even got a principal. What's happening here? And then the position of a principal is to be filled by an outside person of neutral feelings towards the two colleges. Fair enough. But what she says is, she just goes, this is all great, this is fine, but the danger is apparent. If the principal of the RNCM should be appointed, then it would amount to the NSM being swallowed up by the virtue of numbers, syllabus, and authority. This position would be untenable. Recent happenings over headmistresses in Manchester show that it is not impossible for the type of behind-the-scenes action to go on, and the matter of principals has been, so far, avoided. Presumably the position would be advertised. She is terrified that again, their more royal, more substantial cousin, the Royal Manchester, is going to superimpose their more connected and more established syllabus and personnel and stuff on the new college. This, I think, is 1967. So there's only a few years until the college is actually formed. And she's absolutely paranoid about this. And it just shows that through her work and through her sort of dogged passion, she really puts her foot down. She never gives an inch. And then she has other problems. And apparently the meeting was singularly unproductive. She's very annoyed. The speech and drama course. It seemed incredible that at this stage of the proceedings, Councillor Goldberg should be suggesting trading such an important course to Bolton or Liverpool. Surely Manchester can do something about it. But if the suggestion it should come under the umbrella of the John Dalton College as a polytechnic is not feasible, then we should, without delay, follow up the leads we have to some months ago with Liverpool. Our original idea of linking with Chester went stone cold, mainly through months of delay in getting a reply from Curzon Street. But Councillor Goldberg spoke as if no one had ever thought or made of these moves. Exclamation mark. So she is also terrified that, again, this legacy of hers and of Hilda Collins, this idea that Manchester should offer a holistic cultural training course in music and drama, be just swept aside. Because again, there's this idea from the funders that, will you just teach music? Why don't you just teach music? Just teach music, you're totally fine. Why are we funding all this other stuff? You can send it elsewhere. And then again, the issue of part-time senior and junior students. The Royal Manchester College of Music does not accommodate this. So what are we going to do? What all this effort and all this valuable work the Northern School does, where's it going to go to? And luckily, we do get it at the Royal Northern. But the closing remark is fantastic. After service of over 40 years on the staff of the Northern School of Music, I feel most strongly that this is rather passive attitude in regard to our problems is much to be deplored. Let us come out into the open and know what is going on, so that action can be taken. It's like a rallying call. It's brilliant. And this is very much Ida at her most fierce. She is not compromising. She knows exactly what she's about. She knows exactly what she's doing. And she is making sure the Northern School of Music has a firm foothold on the legacy of its legacy in the Royal Northern. There we are. And then it opens. After nearly 20 years of chats, nearly 20 years of these records, we have a whole box of this stuff. There's just Ida going, no, 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 for 20 years nearly. And then in 1972, the college is founded, and it's opened in 1973. Our 50th anniversary is coming up in a few years, so watch this space for lots of really interesting activity that we're hoping to deliver to kind of celebrate the legacies of the school, its staff and its students and its premises, which is a really cool building. I love her Ida's expression here. She's going, what are you doing? I love this kind of stuff. So the Northern School of Music, founded in 1920, was founded by women and run by women. It started with 9 students. It ended up teaching nearly 13,000, 14,000 students. It did so many things that was not expected of a school. It had part-time students, it had evening students, drama students, speech students, elocution, junior school. Its junior school was so prolific. It taught thousands and thousands of young people who would not have had access to music education otherwise. And it made such an impression on some of these students that some of the people that I talked to have vivid memories of the building and vivid memories of the people, the characters that came through. That I don't know about you, but I can't remember anything from my school days. I don't remember any of my teachers' names, but everyone remembers Ida Carroll, and everyone remembers Dorothy Pilling. Everyone remembers being greeted at Griff by the door with his pipe, Paul, and everyone remembers the green, awful tiling as you went into the building and the winding, creaky stairs as they grew up. One man remembered it so much, he drew me a map of the building. He went as a child and it stuck with him for so long, this memory of this incredible school. If anyone's now looking for the building, it has been torn down. It was on the corner of Sydney Street and Oxford Road, so opposite the Proud Trust. It was then part of the University of Manchester's Sports Centre, which has now been torn down. Its premises on Deansgate and above Tudor Galleries and 260 Deansgate, they are now offices or they've been destroyed. The only physical remnant of the building is a stained glass window in St Anne's Church, which is actually Perspex, and it was commissioned by the Northern School of Music's Old Students Association, and it's in memory of Hilda Collins. It's an abstract Perspex window, and it's in the Lady Chapel to the far right of the church, I think, and it is fantastic. So that is the only physical remnant of the school in the entire city. There's no blue plaque, apart from the blue plaque on the Carroll House in Didsbury, but there's none of the actual physical buildings, which is why it's so important for the archives and for the college to highlight and recognise the legacy of the Northern School of Music in its alumni sessions, or its alumni section, in its junior section, and the kind of, even our Northern name is because Ida Carroll said, you're putting us in there somewhere, mate. So we have a Northern College of Music. One thing I did want to show you just before we go, we've got loads of time for questions and all kinds of stuff, is where you can find information about the school. So let's have a look. Manchester Digital Music Archive. The Manchester Digital Music Archive, cleverly acronymed MDMA, is one of my favourite things to play with. And we have on its exhibitions, if you go to there and you go through exhibitions, you scroll down, and a 2020 Legacy, the centenary of the Northern School of Music. We have on here all of the images that we are digitising. They're all going to go up on here. And you just scroll through, you can read all of these letters that Jeff wrote to Ida. We've got about 250 up at the moment, but there's over 1,000 to go. Wish me luck. And there's also the cards they sent to each other, these fantastic programmes that the school produced from the 1930s to the 1970s. We have, let's get some of these photographs. Let's have a look. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Here we go. So these photographs. Does anyone remember the van? No, the RNCM blue van. Apparently we had a van. Don't know where that's gone. Yeah, Jeff does. So that's Ida and John Manuel observing the van. And then there's photographs of Ida and her family, the home, which is still there on Lapwing Lane. And just fantastic, incredible photographs of the school and its students and its performers and its people. There's Griff again, looking lovely. And we also have Walter Carroll's little records about Ida's early years as a music student. And so that's this one here. You can just click through and read those. If there's, sometimes they don't come up very well. So again, if you just want a copy, just let me know and I can send you the digital copy, the high-res versions. And there's also things like videos that we've done, little intros about the school, and as well as oral histories on there as well. This will be constantly updated probably for about the next year. So as we've digitized thousands of images, we've got thousands and thousands, I think we've got about 9,000 images. Some of them we can't put up online because of GDPR, but what we can do, I will eventually put entirely on MDMA. And again, the archive does live within the college, so if anyone's interested to come and sit and look at it when we're allowed, then you're more than welcome to do so if anyone is interested in any of the nuances of the school or just to learn more about it. So Harvey, if you're interested in the eurythmics and that kind of thing, give me a shout, we'll get you access to the stuff we've digitized, as well as sitting down and looking at the stuff if anyone's interested. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Thanks very much for sticking with it. We do have quite a bit of time for questions, or if anyone wants to have a look at anything again, just give me a shout, unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I'll just have a look through now, but do let me know. Your chance to chat to me while we're here.
Well, thank you, Heather. I mean, I told her she was good, didn't I? There is just so much there, that there's such a rich history, and it's wonderful that we are now beginning to acknowledge the marvelous legacy that this college has to draw on in both of the two constituent colleges. I mean, I can remember Ida Carroll.
Oh, yeah.
She was exactly as you describe her. She was as wide as she was tall, and she was fearsome. I can also remember being involved in clearing her house after she died, and she had kept absolutely everything. I mean, we got rid of about 12 bin bags of stuff that we couldn't keep, but there was just so much there. And it's because people keep these things, we have these wonderful archives.
Yeah.
So thank you once again. Can we all show our appreciation for a really good talk to Heather?
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
And does anybody have any questions? I can't help feeling that there are so many potential research projects waiting to happen here.
Jeff, I put a question up on the chat actually, and I'm just curious to know if there are any recordings or films of the concerts from the Northern School, you know, from years ago.
Unfortunately not. It's really frustrating. If concerts were recorded, they weren't kept. Recording a concert was really expensive, and because they did a lot of recording in the Holdsworth Hall, there wasn't that equipment installed, so we don't have any recordings. We do have some recordings of the Royal Manchester College, but not the Northern School. We have a lot of the programs, so we can there's a lot of reviews in the Guardian of the performances, so we can kind of get an idea of what was played and how it was played, but we don't actually have any recordings that we know of. Some might have been recorded privately, but we just don't have them in the archive yet. So if anyone does come across any, please do let me know. I'd be fascinated to learn. It is frustrating.
Okay, thanks, Heather. And can I just add that that was a totally fascinating lecture talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
What we might have are recordings of individual students who went on to become teachers at this college.
There's also there was a few students that went on to be very successful, like John Wilson, who became like the piano accompanist, and there's also Alfreda Hodgson, who was a really famous contralto. She studied at the college. So there are recordings of students, but not from the school, if that makes sense. Someone's asked about brass. Is there a record of any brass students with the NSM before the merger? There are a few. When they started to get more male students, I don't think there are any female brass players. I could be wrong there though. There was enough brass students or brass performers to even put on small brass concerts, if I remember correctly. But have a look at the programs on the Manchester Digital Music Archive. They're all there, and they should have there are a few concerts, or there are, if I remember correctly, there are at least a few pieces programmed for horn. So have a look through, and again, if it's not quite clear online, just give me a shout and I'll send them through to you, Eleanor, because if I remember correctly, there are a few. So if you're interested, it's worth looking through. Oh yeah, someone's mentioned Northern Accent. That was a book written in I forget the guy's name, but yes, this one. Thank you, Harvey. Yes. And here's one we made earlier. Yeah, so that's a record, a historical record of the school, and it actually details really well who performed what and the narrative of the school from the minutes and the papers, the magazines and the newspaper clippings. So it briefly touches on some of the things we've explored here, like Griffin and Ida's relationship and the idea about their programming being a little bit more contemporary than usual. But there's a lot that isn't explored in the book, but it's a really good starting point. It is incredibly biased, as most history books about organisations commissioned by the organisation are, but it's a really good starting point, and it's quite well indexed, which I do appreciate. So if anyone wants to start there, if you're interested in anything particular, start there and then check in with me to see if we have anything that can kind of back up or explore.
I thought you might have told us the story of the Carroll curve.
Oh my God! Right. So this is another rumor that's been told to me by a couple of people. So this is another example of Ida Carroll putting her foot down in the face of giant organisations and corporations. So the Northern School of Music, when it was on Oxford Road, was occupied a few buildings, or a few sections of the same building. And in the 1960s, the Mancunian Way was being built, and it's going through Manchester city centre. In its path is the Northern School of Music. So part of the building gets knocked down to make way for the school, only a part. They were going to go through the whole thing. And if you look at the Mancunian Way at the moment, or as it is, there's a curve as it goes over the city centre, and it does that around. And apparently the reason for this is because Ida Carroll says you can have one building, but you can't have both. And she put her foot down and stopped the motorway being built through the school. And that apparently, unofficially, is known as the Ida Carroll curve. She stopped the motorway being built. Something's amazing. But one of the things that's been recorded in the newspapers was there was quite a obviously when the motorway sits right next to the building, or it did. The building's not there anymore, but it did sit right next to the building. And there's a note in the newspapers that says the drilling, as they were creating the newspaper, was kind of ended up being in competition with some of the percussion and brass from the students, and they kind of tried to compete against each other, to the point where when the music examinations were being held at the school, because from 1953 they were able to issue their own diplomas. Before, you had to go to London to sit the LRAM. They could issue their diplomas at that time. They kind of said, do you mind, just while we're doing these really important exams, can you not drill right next to us? Like literally you could look out the window and see the motorway being built. So there's a lot of I just put her mark on the city. Even again, you wouldn't know it, but looking around, she's all over the place.
There's a question from Gavin actually in the chat.
Oh yeah.
Over to you, Gavin.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, Heather. This is so interesting. I'm particularly interested in the way that the two independent organisations then kind of merged. No, they didn't really merge, but they became the Royal Northern. Thinking about the entrepreneurial nature of the Northern School of Music, was that quite unusual, do you know, for somebody to just set up a sort of a relatively independent kind of music school? Was it a one-off in Manchester? Was it quite common?
From what I know, there were a couple, but none quite as successful as the Northern schools. There was the Royal Manchester, which always been, as far as I'm aware, a public institution. It was founded by the public contributions to the school to set up. The Northern School of Music, founded as the Mathey School of Music, Manchester, that was originally private, that became public, but it was really successful in what it did. But there was a couple. There was the Manchester School of Music, which was a private organisation. We don't know much about it, and that was set up in a couple of rooms under Albert Square, I think, or around Albert Square, and that was a private institution, and that hasn't had any legacy, as far as we're aware, and we can't find any archive records about it. It's so frustrating. And then there were other smaller music schools. For example, Dorothy Pilling, who was a student who ended up the lady in the leotard at the school. She founded a school in Todmorden. That was, I think it was called the Rhythmic School of Music or something, and that was like a Saturday school for kids, but again it didn't succeed. So I don't know, I haven't done that much looking into other schools, but certainly in Manchester the Northern School, as an entrepreneurial endeavour, was the only successful one that we know of that has existed, and it just seems to be because of how varied it was, because of the variety of offer, and also the doggedness of Hilda Collins and Ida Carroll pumping it through. There's not much information that we can find in the local authority archives, because you would only have to register things like taxes and that kind of thing. You would only have to send those records through officially to be kept if you were paid through by public tax. So the private institutions, there's not much that we can find. Didn't have to send those records anywhere, so we don't really know much about it. But so far, it's just the Northern School that we know of, yeah. But if anyone knows of any others, then yeah. Tonya, Albert Square, Manchester School of Music was the one in Albert Square. I think it did organ and piano mainly, but we don't know much about it.
It did a lot. I've been doing some work on the Manchester School of Music. It did a lot more. It was founded by a chap called John Cross for his son Albert Joseph Cross, and it's quite an important institution in the introduction of new music into Manchester in the early part of the last century.
Ooh.
But we are hampered by the fact that I cannot trace any administrative records anywhere.
Tonya, we'll have to sit you down and do a full oral history with you about the school, because I know you went. Yeah,
Tonya went there.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yes, Anna.
Jeff, what was the Dr. Marks one called?
Oh, I can't remember. Hang on, I may have the relevant copy of Manchester Sounds here.
Because there was another school founded by this Dr. Mark. That's
right, and a sort of numismatic colleague of mine called Peter Cromit has done quite a lot of work on it. Just bear with me, I'll just find the relevant copy.
Yeah, how the
Robert Beale's article is in Manchester Sounds, volume 8. Because Dr. Mark also ran a choir as well. It was a temperance thing. Dr. Mark was very well known in the temperance movement in Manchester. But
Janet's made a good point about the school and the idea that women had to fight to have their work recognised and not be asked to play second fiddle, almost. The Northern School of Music definitely was the exception. These incredible women put their entire life into this school and made this incredible legacy. And it definitely shows kind of, I want to say, that Mancunian spirit. It seems, the more I look into it, the more it feels very, the way it's done and the resilience of it, and the let's just give it a go and we'll do things differently here. It seems very Mancunian, which is quite nice. And yeah, the fact that these incredible women, and we have so much information about them, is it's a real privilege to be able to preserve them and give access to them and explore them. Again, if anyone's interested, just give me a shout.
the bit of the bridge that goes around the is the one that's near, sort of just down the road past All Saints, isn't it? The just by the Man Met buildings. That's the relevant bit of the motorway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So next time you ever get to walk down there, whenever that might be,
tip your forelock to Ida, Carroll. The All Saints Park was, I don't know if I've got any ready, but that was where they did their school photo every year. They all lined their full-time students up in All Saints Park and did these long exposure photographs, and they're the really long ones that always roll up. They're really frustrating. But this is another thing that the Northern School of Music did and created that the Royal Manchester didn't, was the amount of photographs we have of the students. Even on their student record cards, some of them have little photographs of the student themselves, and we have so much information about the students that I wouldn't have expected to get with another school. And I don't know if it's just because they thought we'll take photos, that's a thing we do, or if they sort of purposefully said we're going to record every single person that comes through this building. Unfortunately, pre-1943, as a private organisation, there isn't much information about. There aren't any student record cards. There are the examination results, but there's not any student record cards. And I don't know if it's because it was a private organisation and those records just weren't kept until 1943, or if it was when not GDPR, but data protection came in what, 1998? I think it could be earlier, or 1980 something. And there was like a cull of information because of the records just don't exist. But from that point, there's this wealth of info about these students. Some students came from the Isle of Wight to study at the Northern School. It wasn't just a local school for local people. People came from Scotland, the Isle of Wight, all over Cumbria and Lancashire to study with the school. They had these amazing people that would study, that would give guest lectures and masterclasses and all kinds of stuff. The school, it's Ofsted now. I can't remember what it's called before, but there was someone who basically came and did an audit of the whole school. I can't remember his name, Bernard someone, I think. And he was so impressed with the school that he decided to support it himself. So he came to do an audit of the school to make sure that it was doing what it was supposed to do, and that it was spending public money in a way that it was supposed to be spent. And he was so impressed that he came back and gave the annual distribution of awards to the students. He would give speeches on behalf of the school. He would come and support them in their endeavours. He even started to help with when the merger happened. He was so impressed with the school. It's such an interesting, it kind of seems to absorb people. The Northern School of Music. You go as a student and you stay as a teacher. You go to audit it and you stay as a supporter. There's a lot of really interesting kind of characters that come through. And there was one chap, Sumner Austin, who who directed the operas, I think. And at the time, he was in his 70s or 80s, but he would come down every week from London and spend 2 days solid, straight, going through these operas and supporting these students. He did it for years and years and years. He had such faith and such passion for the school that he did it well into his 80s, I think. Inspector of Schools, that's it, Jane. Yeah, I forget the I'm not a historian, so dates, names and times and places just How long have we got?
Do we have any further questions? This is where you need the bar, isn't it, to carry on the conversation? Well, thank you once again, Heather, for an absolutely fascinating talk. I always knew it was going to be fascinating, and I think it's gone down really well. So go out and spread the word to all your friends. Get lots of people applying to come here and do research onto the Northern School of Music. We'd be delighted.